Good afternoon, everybody. We will start on time. Welcome here at the RES4LIVE session on renewable energy for livestock systems. Our project is ending up now, the end of the month, so you will see all the results that we gathered in this session. And also welcome to the people that are following online. If you have any issues or any questions for the speakers, please put them in the chat. And then Ricardo here in the room will give us a signal if there's a question, and then we try to divide a bit between questions from the room and questions from the chat. And my name is Jarissa Masselijne from ILVO Belgium. My co-chair is Michael Odinsov from Regrove in Italy. And like I said, welcome here in the session, but without further ado, we will start with the first presentation. The first author is not here from that presentation, but Michaelis Moraitis will give the talk. So please come forward. And for all the speakers, you have 15 minutes, but that's 12 minutes presentation, 3 minutes for questions. And if you see the counter running, if you're approaching the 12 minutes, I will signal you so you wrap up.
Okay.
Okay? Go ahead.
So, hello everyone. I will present in the place of Mr. Paris, the energy use in the EU livestock sector. It's a review recommending energy efficiency measures and renewable energy sources adoption. So, as an introduction, let's say that while significant data is available on European level, on the production levels, production patterns, and financial accounts regarding the livestock in EU, relatively little information is available on the energy use associated with the production. Taking in mind that in recent years, national and EU policy is increasingly focused on improving environmental sustainability and animal welfare, the rearing and the production will need to transform also to set the goals, to achieve the goals set in the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. So for the development and the realization of these goals, a clear understanding of energy use concentrations in the livestock sector is a prerequisite. The goal of this paper was to provide a review of energy use in the livestock sector in the European Union by bringing together data from a range of studies. A few more slides on the introduction here. So many existing studies provide figures on the energy use associated with the production of animal feed. However, there's a significant variation on the origin of the material used in the livestock system. In all these studies, in most cases actually, the proportion of feed makes up for 50% or up to 75% of the total energy consumption in the livestock sectors. Of course, as you expect, in most systems, the livestock is kept in animal housing. But again, we have a significant variation depending on the structures used, the conditions, the agroclimatic conditions, and the type of livestock. Let's add here that in dairy systems, the energy consumption is heavily shown onto the milking processes. Now, let's move to the results. Okay, first, in all main production systems, apart from beef, the animal feed was the main energy input, accounting for about 75% of all energy requirements. In the meat production systems, the main direct energy requirements were for housing, feeding, and manure management. The housing and the feeding was mostly dependent on electricity, while the manure management on diesel fuel. In the milking systems, the main energy consuming activities were related to milking, milk cooling, and water heating as expected, and they were mostly onto electricity and fossil fuels. As you can see also in the graph, the beef was the most energy intensive production system. And then we had pork, and then poultry. In this graph, the energy inputs are in megajoules per kilogram of produced. Now, let's move to dairy production. So, in the European Union, around 160 million tons of cow milk are produced annually. The leading country is Germany, followed by France, the Netherlands, and Poland. You can see the percentages on the text. Of course, the milk production systems vary significantly, from low and highland to intensive and extensive. The majority of milk production occurs in intensive systems, as expected. And the energy embedded in the feed was the highest energy inputs in all but one of the studies. So as you can see on the graph, with the blue is representing the feed, and the orange the direct energy use in the farm. Moving on to beef production. In 2018, the EU production of beef reached 7.9 million tons. The first countries were the main production was from France and Germany. There was a significant heterogeneity between the production systems. It is noted that even that in the beef production, the heterogeneity was bigger than in other livestock systems. And it was also noted that the production of beef carries the highest environmental load per kilogram of meat. 60 to 70% of energy consumption is associated with on-farm activities, but in general there is a big scarcity of data across a variety of methodologies in calculating the energy use. Finally, according to the Agricultural and Food Research Council, methods for predicting energy use in beef production systems are outdated. Moving on to pork production. This for me? Thank you. Thank you very much. So, the production of pork accounts for around half of the EU's meat total production. It is estimated around 24 million tons. More than 3/4 of the pork production occurs in just 6 member states, namely Germany, Spain, France, Poland, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Italy. Generally, the pork production is intensive, but there are large variations in the size and the focus among the different farms. And again, we see that the feed consists up to 75% of the energy usage. Regarding direct energy use, it's mainly associated with manure management, housing, and feeding systems, mainly in the form of electricity, but also diesel fuels. Again, in the graph, you can see how much of the energy is onto feed. Now, regarding poultry for meat production, in 2019, poultry production reached approximately 15 million tons in the EU, only in the EU. Broiler production was by far the largest producer of poultry meat, for over 8%. And then we had 14% of turkeys. And again, around 75% of the total energy use was associated with feed. And then we had the heating, regarding the on-farm energy consuming activity. Again, we have significant geographical variations related to warmer climates. Regarding poultry production, around 400 million laying hens are kept in the EU at the time of the study, so this was around 2021. In general, there is relatively little information available on chicken egg production in the EU. But again, at least 50% of all energy inputs were associated with feed. Again, as you can see on the graph, the blue bars represent, these are different studies, and again, the blue bars represent the feed, the orange, the direct energy use. Some conclusions, some general conclusions. First, of course, as it was clear from the previous slides, animal feed is the largest energy consuming activity in livestock systems. Regarding the on-farm energy use, we mainly have housing and the manure management as main consumers. Electricity is generally used for lighting, feeding, milking systems. And fossil fuels are associated with direct energy inputs. Switching to more renewable electricity and thermal sources could help reduce the amount of fossil energy. Energy use in the livestock housing is likely to be found higher in Northern Europe because of the heating needs. Livestock grown on locally produced feed requires considerably less energy, and finally, there is no clear overview of the specific proportion of energy sources in livestock. It is, however, generally accepted that diesel use is the largest energy source. In general, further research is needed to gain a better overview of the total energy consumption in EU livestock farming. Regarding renewable energy sources, it is seen that they do provide a unique opportunity to farmers to reduce their farm's external inputs. In recent years, there has been done increased research to improve the energy efficiency and sustainability of livestock housing, but of course the effectiveness of RES is associated with a combination of factors like the position, the local environment, and more. It is expected that livestock, along with other sectors, will eventually move towards renewable energy sources and high efficiency technologies. Now, there were some significant barriers and limitations to this review. There are large data gaps for certain livestock categories. There are not standardized methodologies for accounting for energy use in livestock and agricultural systems. And this review was compounded by the diversity and heterogeneity of livestock production systems. So it's necessary to develop a standardized methodology and terminology for measuring, evaluating, and comparing with other studies on energy use on livestock farms. We'll skip this slide. And this is it, thank you. This work was done in the context of Horizon 2020 projects Agrofossil Free and RES4LIVE. And for more info, please, you can contact Mr. Basparis. Thank you.
Questions from the room? Questions from the chat, Ricardo? No?
Yeah. So I have one question. You talked a lot about feed, and you also mentioned that local feed is more energy efficient. Did you add any data about breakdown, about the feed energy consumption, machinery in the field, transport, storing, treatments? How does it break down, the feed part?
No, this study did not include a breakdown of the feed, but it was interesting to set the limit. So where do we set the limit of the field? Where does it account for feed, and where does it go for on farm? So for this study, if I remember well, it was set up to the farm limit. So up to the transportation to the farm, it was considered feed. Then it was considered on-farm energy for the feeding system. But it is a very important issue to set this.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Anyone else with a question? Yes?
Interesting speech, and of course the breakout of the energy consumption could be also very interesting in relation to the use of electricity on the farm. I mean, for ventilation, for maintenance, for manure removal, and so on, would give more insight into what could be the strategies to reduce or for the better use, as well also for the renewable energy. What is the amount or the percentage in which it is? So there is an increase in the last year. So I think it is a good starting point to be further developed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks
as you
for your
said,
speech.
a starting point.
Yeah.
There is need to be done more research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Michaelis can just stay here to give the next talk from RES4LIVE.
Okay, your patience for one more presentation and one more later. Yeah, so this presentation is about energy auditing in intensive livestock facilities, and I will present to you some work that was done in the context of our project, RES4LIVE. Some introduction. So in 2007, the EU leaders set 3 key targets for 2020. 20% cut in the greenhouse emissions comparing to 1990 levels, 20% of EU energy to be derived from renewable energy sources, and 20% improvement in energy efficiency. This was enacted with the Energy Efficiency Directive, but we have a new one now from 2023. I don't remember the exact date that it was set active. But this new directive introduces a series of measures to help accelerate energy efficiency, embracing also the energy efficiency first principle in the energy and non-energy policies. So in this directive, we have some certain points that I think were to be mentioned. So first, as an energy audit, here is the complete. We mean a systematic procedure with the purpose of obtaining adequate knowledge of the energy consumption profile of a building, blah blah, identifying and quantifying opportunities for cost-effective energy savings, identifying the potential for cost-effective use or production of renewable energy, and to report the findings. In this directive, it is also mentioned that the audit should be mandatory and regular for enterprises with an average annual energy consumption above a certain threshold. It is also mentioned that a specific European standard on energy audits is currently under development, but it does not exist yet. So, according to the directive, we have some minimum criteria for the energy audits. So, they have to be up to date, measured, traceable, based on measured, traceable operational data. They have to comprise a detailed review of the energy consumption profile. They should identify energy efficiency measures to decrease energy consumption. So they should conclude to something like a suggestion. They should identify the potential for cost-effective use of production of renewable energy. And they should be built, where possible, on life cycle cost analysis instead of simple payback periods. And finally, be proportionate and sufficiently representative. Of course, the data used shall be storable for historical analysis and tracking performance. So all these are mentioned in the updated directive from 2023. I think some of those were also in the previous directive from 2012. I won't go through the types, but in general we have 3 types. We have the walkthrough energy audits, that is based on energy bills, Then we have the comprehensive energy audit through a survey, and then we have the detailed energy audit, which is done by thorough engineering studies. Yeah, I won't argue more with that. So in our project, in the RES4LIVE project, we carried out 4 energy audits for 4 pilot farms. We had one poultry farm in Greece, one swine farm in Belgium, one dairy farm in Germany, and one more commercial swine farm in Italy. We used specific buildings and not the whole farms as units, as it would be too demanding and too complex. So we used the specific buildings that our project was about to apply some changes, let's say. So the first step was to ask from the farms for descriptions and schematics of the buildings. So we had requested data such as dimensions, construction materials, insulation, and of course intended usage, like what animals are hosted and their population. And then we asked for the consumption data in 4 levels of detail. So according to the energy type, like electrical energy, diesel fuel, biogas, natural gas. On the second level, we assigned this data to each specific building of interest. On the third level, we assigned the consumption to specific devices. And finally, we got the device's working time in hours per month for a full year cycle. As you understand, all this data to be requested from the farms was a tough procedure, and estimations had to be done regarding the timing of the devices and other data. I don't know if this is visible, but these were the forms for the buildings and the farms in general. So there the farms were asked to put the building characteristics as shown before. And this is an example of the energy consumption data for a building. So we have on the left the device type, its power, and then how many hours it has to work for a year. Of course, these were as accurate as possible, but again, it's an estimation. In the context of RES4LIVE project, we also had the chance to evaluate these audits with the help of some energy meters that we installed. So it was a big challenge to select and install those meters in the farms, because there are complex facilities, as you understand, and the selection of the meters was based on the complexity of each facility and the devices to be locked. We chose not to measure things that could be easily calculated, like scheduled devices, for example, lights. But yeah, in the end, we managed to measure a big proportion of this of the energy consumed, and to upload it on the to have it continually available. Sorry. Yeah, for example, here you see some of the energy meters. I think it's from the dairy farm in Germany, LVT. You can see that the energy meters selected were SATEC, I think. And this is how we get the data on the cloud. So I will quickly go through some of the results. On the blue bar represents the estimations, and the gray dot represent the actual measured values. So as in a general look, we can see that the energy audits were pretty close, not absolutely accurate, but pretty close to the measured values. I have noted here with red some values that were really off. So in September, it's not representative because it was logged. The meter began to log late, and the other 2 months represent the fault due to some malfunctions of the meters. Again here, in the dairy farm in Germany, we have some pretty good results. And again, the off values were due to some malfunctions. The first one was, again, because it started to log early. You can see it's not absolutely accurate, but we have a good estimation. Now, this is regarding the production of photovoltaic panels that were installed in one of the farms. These were more off, but again, we had something to work on. Sorry. As an overview, we had some good estimations in the first farm. In the second farm, again, we saw that, again, let me mention here, I forgot to mention something, the first 2 farms was experimental farms. It was proven that a well-executed energy audit can serve as a starting point. And in the third farm, the data was not very accurate, but this was due to some, we didn't carry out the energy audit in the correct way. So, to conclude, energy audits will be as accurate as the data retrieved initially, but they are sufficient for a general estimation, where the installation of energy meters to get the best picture is not feasible. And with those, we can get an initial depiction of the farm's energy consumption, and we can also identify the potential of installing renewable energy systems. Of course, the installation of RES is dependent on other factors, as the farm location, the local environment, and more, but it can serve as a start. And you can find the full work on our site, on the section public deliverables, and there is a full report on the analysis. Thank you.
Okay, we have room for questions.
Online questions? Then I will have another one for you. So you mentioned that you had 3 tiers of audit and that you selected 1 building per farm to reduce the amount of work. How much work was it? How many people for how many hours? And if you would have done it as a job, how much it would cost?
Very good question. I'm not sure I can quantify it, because in this project the farms were our partners, and we asked the farms to provide us the data, and they sent us the forms filled in. I don't know if...
For you to analyze it, how long you said, how many people were in the team?
Let's say 2 people for 6 months, let's say, for all farms. But we get it is really dependent on what data we received, because when you receive good data, it is very easy to. I think, the farms, LVAT, Golinelli, they did a pretty good job in sending us the data, because it was part of a project. I don't know how much would it cost in private.
So no business there yet. Okay, thank you.
But it has potential.
Another question from the room already? No? Okay, I have a question. So we saw that the numbers and absolute values, they do deviate between the estimated and measured values, but how accurate do you think an energy audit needs to be? Like, what's the percentage of deviation that we could have?
I think it's dependent on what is the purpose of the audit initially. So what do I need the audit for? If we take in mind what the EU directive says, and you need to have the energy audit in order to identify energy efficiency measures, I think that it's pretty okay to have deviations like the one we had, because again, you can find the biggest consumers, and you can find the best, some first steps, some basic first steps to apply energy efficiency measures, even with not so good, so much work and not so targeted the results. I think it will serve its job.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Manon Everaert, colleague of mine at ILVO, also PhD student at University of Ghent.
Hello, thank you for coming. I will talk to you about a simulation model for renewable energy systems in livestock farming, 3 case studies. It was actually a simulation performed by Ghent University, performed in 2021 when we still had to select the sources we wanted to integrate on our farms. So about the energy provision in livestock farms, you got a little warm-up by Michaelis. But I will tell that 7.6% of greenhouse gas emissions are related to on-farm energy use in farms. This means on-farm energy use includes climate regulation, the ventilation, the feeding pumps, etc. And this on-farm energy use exists of an electrical demand, which you see by the electricity symbol, and a heat demand, mainly in northern European countries, of course, which I use a flame, or which we can provide with a fuel boiler with fossil fuels, with fuel oil or natural gas, as our case in Belgium. It is found that only 4% of this energy use in barns is provided by renewable energy sources, which indicates that a lot of this energy need is still provided by either fossil fuels, so natural gas or fuel oils, and a grid connection, which also is related to greenhouse gas emissions, depending on the country. For example, France has a very clean electricity grid, while Germany uses more coal centrals, which has more dirty grid. Compared to the rest of the world, the renewable energy integration over there is 30%, so we still need to bump the renewable energy integration of livestock farms up if we ever want to reach the Fit for 55 goals set by Europe, in which every sector should contribute its part. So how will we satisfy these energy demands renewably? That's the focus of my PhD. I will not look into energy efficiency measures, but I will look into renewable energy integration. So here we have our heat demand and our electricity demand of a farm. The heat demand can be provided by renewable heat, mainly from the sun, using solar collectors, as you see here. And we can also store this heat using thermal storage tanks. Then our electricity demand, we can provide that with also solar energy, which is PVs, wind turbines, which uses wind as a renewable energy source, and also storage systems, which is batteries. We also have a PVT system, which integrates both electricity and heat into one solar panel. So it's actually a PV panel with, on the bottom, a solar collector, both providing electricity, renewable electricity, and renewable heat. And then in the end, which I included into my simulations, is the heat pump. A heat pump provides renewable heat, provided that its electricity is also provided with renewable electricity, of course. So those are the systems I included into my model. There's still room for exploitation, so that's what I'm doing my PhD for. Then we solve the energy balance. So for our farms, we need an hourly electricity and heat demand which we will try to fulfill with renewable energy sources. So here we have our farm. As a base case, most of the time its heat demand is provided by a boiler using fuel, oil, or natural gas, or a grid connection. And in yellow, you see the electricity flow my model uses, and in red, you see the heat flow my model uses. Corresponding with fuel, with the boiler and the grid, comes emissions indicated in black, and also costs varying throughout the year, which are indicated in green. Then we can add our renewable energy sources, which is connected to the yellow arrow. And then we see that our cash flow also works in two directions, because in Belgium you can send electricity back into the grid and profit from it, also, although very minimally. We also, when using renewable energy sources, of course, we need weather conditions, which are used as an input. Then we can add a battery if we want. We can add solar collectors if we want. Then our PVT panels, of course, providing both heat and electricity. The thermal storage tank, which can be charged and discharged. And then, of course, our heat pump in the middle, connected to both electricity and heat flows. So this is the modeling approach of my simulation model. To design these technologies, we need to size them, of course. So we need inputs for the sizes that we want to actually simulate and model. Again, we have our solar renewable energy sources. We have our wind turbine, a heat pump, and storage systems. And then we want to simulate different sizes of these technologies. So for an example, as an input, we can simulate 0 meter squared PVs, we can simulate 25 meter squared PVs, etc., etc. Even for our wind turbine, we can have different sizes of heat pumps, and with heat pumps, I actually integrated two kinds of heat pumps, a big one and a small one. And with that, we mean the small one provides heat at 40 degrees centigrade at a lower temperature than the big ones. We need a bigger heat pump if we want to provide heat at 60 degrees centigrade. And then also different sizings of our storage systems. And then what my model does is simulate all these permutations of sizes and technologies, which in the end, I get 60,000 possible scenarios for which I'll calculate the yearly energy balance, as I explained to you before. But it's not feasible or not very useful to have storage systems when we only have a grid connections. We won't store electricity or heat from the grid. So excluding those scenarios, we have 57,928 calculations for which I perform a yearly simulation. This takes about 4 hours, so the model is pretty efficient, I would say. Then we need, of course, our demands of the farm. So we need our heat demand and our electricity demand. And for the farms of RES4LIVE, which already were explained by Michaelis, we used the monthly energy data and interpolated those to hourly values. So for our poultry farm in Greece, we had only an electricity demand and no heat demand because it's already hot over there. And this electricity demand accumulated over the year 2020 to 14 megawatt hours. And you see the curve, it's constant for each month. The same we have for our dairy barn in, in Potsdam, which does have a heat demand, although pretty small compared to the electricity demand, because mainly milk cooling and the milking robots require a lot of electricity. And then for Belgium, we actually have a high heat demand because it's quite cold, and piglets need a lot of heat. They need about 38 degrees centigrade, as most of you probably will know. But there we had a special case, since it's that close to our research facility, we have a dual heat demand. So we have a heat demand at 40 degrees centigrade, providing underfloor heating, and we have a high temperature heat demand, providing sanitary hot water and air preheaters, heat for the air preheaters. So this barn has actually the highest heat demand. On to the results. For the EAAP chicken barn, so the Agricultural University of Athens, I will first have to explain how I present my results. So I have a 3D representation. On the x-axis, I have my investment cost. On the y-axis, the emissions only related to fuel. So the fuel not including tractors, only for the farm itself. And the life cycle cost in green, so the darker it is, the more expensive the installation becomes over a course of 20 years. So very dark means that it will be expensive over 20 years, light means it will be cheap. And everything is expressed relative to the reference scenario, which in the case for our AOA chicken farm is only a grid connection. One example scenario, if we would install 25 meter squared PV panels and a 10 kilowatt wind turbine, we would end up around there on the graph with an investment cost of 33 times our grid connection, and also at a higher life cycle cost over 20 years of 1.16. But our emissions are reduced by 53%. So that is an example scenario. This is how you should interpret the graph. Now let's simulate all of our permutations of PV, wind turbines, and batteries. I only included electrical solutions over there because there was no heat demand in the farm. And then we get a solution space that looks like this. So we see a trend going down, which means as we increase our investment cost, we reduce our emissions. So on the right side, we will encounter more solutions containing wind turbines and bigger installations of PV. But yeah, they come at an investment cost of 100 times the original, our reference scenario, which was estimated to be 1,000 euros, so about 100,000 euros. We also, that's what I had to tell here. Now, how will we find optimal solutions? We use a Pareto front. So a Pareto front makes a trade-off between the x-axis, our investment cost, and the y-axis, the fuel. We can switch around those axes and then we find different optima. And they are also made in brackets of the life cycle cost. As we're working in 3D, we need to take into account the life cycle cost. So our dotted line is more expensive over 20 years than our not so dotted line, actually. One of the optima I pointed out into the graph was the installation of 50 meter square PV panels and a battery of 5 kilowatts, which would increase the investment cost by 4 times the original installation, but reduce the fuel emissions by 51%. And with a small advantage over 20 years at 99% compared to the grid connection. And our RES4LIVE installation actually ended up around there. We installed about a 10 kilowatt PV system, which increases the investment cost compared to a grid connection, which is actually quite cheap by 10 times. But over 20 years, our costs will be reduced by 11%, and our fuel emissions will be reduced by 33%. For our dairy farm in Germany, as a reference scenario, we have a boiler on fuel oil and actually biomass, but this wasn't integrated into the model. So there I chose to simulate. I do have heat sources over there because there was a small, yet non-negligible heat demand. And then we have a solution space that looks like this. Again, the trend of increasing investment cost reduces emissions. Again, some Pareto fronts, and I will go a bit faster now. I also had an example, but our RES4LIVE installation ends up, according to the simulation about there, we only integrated PVT panels at LVAT. So that's the only thing that is simulated because we put the focus more onto bio-CNG, which Lucas will talk about at the end of the session. But we should have a reduced life cycle cost of about 2%. And then finally, for our pig farm in Belgium, where the original installation was a grid connection and a natural gas boiler, providing heat to our 2 heat sources now. And we see this result, and here it's very interesting because we see tree clouds gradually reducing the emissions. And this is due to the heat pumps that are simulated. So I chose to have a big heat pump and a small heat pump. And the upper cloud has no heat pumps in its solutions. The middle cloud has only the 40 degrees centigrade heat demand provided by a heat pump. And then the bottom cloud has all of the heat demand of the farm integrated with heat pumps. So those reduce most of the emissions and actually are able to reduce 60% of the emissions related to energy, of course. Again, our Pareto funds and our RES4LIVE installation here is actually very close to the bottom Pareto funds. According to the simulation, it should cost less over a period of 20 years, but we have 2 heat pumps in our farm, which are quite expensive, so that makes the investment costs go up. So now to my conclusions. Zero fuel solutions rapidly increase investment costs, so we always have to make a trade-off between the investment cost and the emissions. The new installations at our chicken barn and at our pig barn in Belgium should be beneficial for emission reductions and for the life cycle cost, but do come at an increased investment cost. And at LVAT, the potential of bio-CNG was more investigated, which was not included into the model. So thank you for your attention, and I'm sorry for going over time.
Okay, thank you, Manon. I suggest that anybody that has questions come and find Manon during the coffee break. Thank you. So we come back. I think normally it's Michaelis coming again. So we have a famous speaker for the third and last time, I think.
Yeah, you won't see me again. It's the last time. So this third presentation regards some work that was done in the context of RES4LIVE sister project, Agrofossil Free. Agrofossil Free was concluded last year, and we're going to talk about the Ag Energy Platform, which is an outcome of the project, and it's actually a tool to search and assess fossil energy-free technologies and strategies. Some general info quickly. No, let's keep that. Okay, so the problem statement from left to right. So the idea is that the last 20 years, innovative technologies and strategies are applied in most economic sectors, but they are not applied in agriculture with the same intensity because it was not considered the main energy consumer and greenhouse gases producers. So additionally, the high cost of such technologies for small, medium farmers due to low income or lack of sufficient incentives lead to these technologies not applied in agriculture in such extent. But, of course, as we all know, we find some fields that they can apply, especially in open field production, but more in control and controlled environment agricultural constructions, such as greenhouses, and of course what interests us more is livestock buildings. So to summarize, there is an important gap between such developments and the actual adoptions, and this gap can be closed by, we think that this gap can be closed by first gaining knowledge of existing and future technological advancement, and then to acquire training of the farmers within the EU. Of course, these two are fully aligned with the fossil energy reduction policies of the EU, the European Green Deal, and sustainable food production practices like the farm to fork strategies. So in this project, we use the term fossil energy-free technologies and strategies, which was divided in 3 main categories. The first was on-site renewable energy production. The second was energy efficiency measures and rational use of energy in agriculture. And finally, The third term was soil carbon sequestration practices. So the technologies and strategies that were identified were split in these three categories. As a general approach of the project, starting from the bottom and moving up, we focused on initially the assessment of the EU agricultural energy status and farmers' needs. We moved to create an inventory of the technologies, mainly not only technologies but papers, projects, products, training material, and of course financing tools. Then we did some innovation, some workshops to get in touch with farmers. And as a fourth step, we created the platform that we'll present to you in a while. And finally, we suggested some policy guidelines. In this slide, I wanted to emphasize a bit on the current status of the energy use in the EU. So what is the main motive for farmers to adapt, and what are the main barriers? As a motive, of course, there's the lower energy cost and the potential profit of the farmer. And as a complementary, the reduction of environmental impact. But then we have the main barriers, which are, of course, leading is the affordability and the high upfront cost of the installation of such technologies. Then we have, as told by the farmers, the bureaucracy and the complicated procedures in all countries that we had the workshops. Then we had the farmers not knowing what the best fitting, which is the most compatible technology for their farm. And as a fourth point, that they had the people that owned small farms didn't think that it was interesting for them to bother at all with this. As a final note, the two-thirds of the renewable energy source adopters said that a specific subsidy would be a great opportunity for them to invest. Now, let's see what we did in the Ag Energy platform. Which is of course accessible on platform.agrofossilfree.eu. So this is a platform where these fossil energy-free technologies and strategies are hosted, namely 2,000 of them, and they keep increasing because anyone can register free, of course, and add his technology, his material, his whatever he has to add, he can add it there. It's more like an online shopping, let's say, platform. From the left, you put the filters. From the right, you get on the right, you get the results. So regarding the type, the technology used, it's the idea was to be pretty convenient for any farmer to use. So for each technology, let's say, we have a random example here. We have the information, the general information, like in which domain it applies, what applications, which is the technology used. For example, here, in this solution can be applied in livestock. Then we have the provider in the second tab. So the farmer or any interested party can contact directly the company. Material, if there is any, apart from, let's say, a PDF file or a video, what is available is uploaded there. And anyone adding the technology can fill in these fields. And finally, we have the assessment. So anyone who has used the technology or can assess it for others to see it. I forgot to mention here that the platform is available in 8 languages, by the way. And apart from that, which is the general platform, we implemented an AI decision support tool. So which actually, the idea is to help the farmers by to mimic the consultation by a number of experts. So when you navigate to the decision support tool, you can pick a general category like open field farming, livestock farming, greenhouse farming. In this example, we have put livestock farming for obvious reasons. So you put some filters like what's the animal hosted, what is the size of the farm, which is the distance to some things like to the electricity distribution grid and other things. So you select those in a general manner, and you get some results based on these selections. Again, I will say it is very simple to use. So if I select commercial technologies and I go to intelligent management system, you get the solutions that are relative to the filters selected. And then if you select one of the technology, you go to the screen you saw before, and you can select. If I select some financing mechanisms, again, with the same way, you get the results. You can sort them by date or by date added or some other filters. And it's pretty easy to use, as I said. Finally, in the same platform, we host some successful case study stories. So, some examples are there for any interested party to see and easily access that material. That is all. For any additional info, anyone can scan the QR or go on the platform, see the data, add his own technology or training or whatever. And for more info, you can contact on the email that you see there. Thank you.
We have time for questions.
No online questions, neither. So you get me again. You woke up the forestry student in me.
Sorry?
You woke up the forestry student in me because you talk about on-farm energy production. Did you had any technology providers that do biomass pyrolysis? They burn the residue of the farm to produce energy, and they do biochar at the same time?
You mean in the technology, in the inventory?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there are. We have to check. I don't know. But it's really easy to navigate and check. I can check for you now. I don't remember the technologies that's in there right now. You said about bio...
When you burn residue on the farm, in a controlled environment with no oxygen, you produce biochar and energy. So there are some technology providers that do it.
I will make sure to go check now and tell you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there another question or comments? No? Okay. Then I'll visit the platform and see what it's about. And thank you, Michaelis. So our next speaker is Anatoly Rontonciani. We have a question from the chat. Yeah, we have time. We can take it.
So from...
There's the microphone.
So from the online audience, Lorraine Lebel, do you have a list of the indicators used for decision-making support? I guess this is for this presentation. If you have a list of the indicators used for decision-making support.
I do not have a list, but maybe we can check on the website if they are available on the project website on agrofossilfree.eu.
Okay, that was it from the chat. Yeah. Okay, then we go to Anatoly. Thank you.
Hello. At this presentation, we're going to make a step back in order to overview the livestock sector under the climate transition. Before that, you can scan, for whoever haven't done that yet, the QR for the very interesting RES4LIVE website. And Okay. At this part, regarding the livestock sector and under the climate transition, there are 4 baseline characteristics. The first one, regarding the greenhouse gases that associated with the main climate variables, that affects of course, the supply chains, the water resources, the well-being of the animals, and of course the production. The second point has to do with the sector and the need, how need is worldwide. 31% of the global per capita calories and protein supply are supplied from the livestock sector. Then demand, and this is a critical point, are expected to increase due to the very rapidly increase of the population growth. Third point, regarding the IPCC highlights report about the fossil fuel that is generally used in this sector in indirect emissions, in indirect emissions on after the farm emission, post-farm emissions, that has to be immediately immediately need the sector to meet the demands of 2016 Paris Agreement. Sorry. And finally, this is a huge problem too, because there is no one model size approach to reduce the emissions in the livestock ecosystem because of the production system, species and location process that has unique characteristics and costs and benefits. Before that, I'd like to present interconnection of livestock and greenhouse gases of a previous research work, which I found very interesting. Regarding the impact of the climate change on livestock, the main 3 points are, of course, as expected, the increase of the CO2 gases, carbon dioxide, the increase of the temperature, the overall temperature, and the precipitation variation. And regarding the impact of the livestock on the climate change, again, 3 main points. Those more expected, the increase of the nitrous oxide, N2O, gases, of course, CO2, and as expected, the methane. In order to evaluate those, we conducted a bibliometric analysis in order to underline the trends and the shortcomings of the sector. We conducted that under the main idea, the initial idea was to search the 4 clusters as was presented from FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of UN, animal comfort, animal feeding, lowering the overall emissions, and of course the market that needs to be adapted in the new climate conditions. But why we why we choose to make a bibliometric analysis? Because it summarizes the large quantities of bibliometric data in order to present the current state of the intellectual structure and the emergent trends of a research topic. And this is both quantitative and qualitative analysis. And especially in our case, we did with scientific mapping of co-work analysis, which is a technique that examines the existing and future relationships among the topic of interest and focuses on the right and context of the publication itself. And for that cohort analysis of bibliometric analysis, I used the Vosviewer visualization program. Before that, I used the Web of Science platform. Web of Science platform has the earlier results of peer-reviewed papers. That's why I chose that for the first stage. And here are the results of a preliminary analysis under text mining functionality. In the first column, you can see the outcome after the clusters suggested from FAO. Regarding the animal comfort, there are very few results, just 38, with the first one at 2003. Regarding the animal feeding, a bit more, 1,046 results from 1996, the first peer-reviewed paper that came out. Regarding the energy consumption, I was expecting more. There were very few, just 2,045 results, the first one at 1993. And lastly, regarding the overall market, Almost 700 results. The first one, again, came out in 1993. Those were very few results for an analysis. That's why I checked the generic case of livestock and climate change, where almost 10,000 results came out. And the first one, that's the interesting part again, was at 1939. So the methodology of this last case, the generic case, is the database of Web of Science, as I said before. The keywords was livestock and climate change, the sample of 9,446 different peer-reviewed papers, and the tool of cohort analysis. The limitation on that was were used the papers that was cited at least 10 times. And that chaotic bubble sketch, bubble graph came out. The different colors are because of the clusters that are formed in a minimum resolution, and they have a strong interconnection because in each cluster, the keywords that came out, you will see a better graph later, there are formed under at least 20 interactions in this same cluster. This is the same graph, and those are the 5 main clusters. There are 3 much smaller that are formed. The purple one, the cluster interconnections are mostly the dairy. Okay, let me show you maybe this. This is exactly the same graph, but I pop out the main keywords that came out from the main 5 clusters. So the purple clusters is about dairy cows, the Hoslane, it seems to be very common breed, the rumen fermentation, and the coconut oil. The second different cluster is about the livestock, greenhouse gases, the welfare of the animal, the crime and policy in general, the mature management, the nitrification, and several illnesses that you can find in the livestock, and mostly zoonosis and malaria. And the green cluster, the third one, is about the system's vulnerability, the pastoralism, the local knowledge farmers, and generally the income. The yellow, smaller cluster is about nitrogen and sequestration, and the final last one, the red one, was about the biodiversity plant diversity, dynamics, the NDI index, the grazing, and the alblin glasslight. You can see the connections between the clusters with the previous clustering from FAO. The blue clusters corresponds to the animal well-being, the green one to the market in general, and the red one to the animals feeding, but there is no special clusters for the energy part, which is again interesting. Here is the same graph, but with different colors because we present the publications under the time that they were published. We said that we had initially almost 10,000 publications, and the interesting part is that at 2020 and after, we have almost 450, almost the half of the sample. In the yellow bubbles, you can see the keywords of those 4,500 publications. And you can see that the main keywords the last 4 years are mostly has to do with the body temperature and the heat stress, the adaptation strategies and the availability of the system, the poverty and income, the welfare, the net primary productivity, the NOx emissions, which is interesting because I was expecting the methane emissions, and as it seems, very famous Hosley cows. So this is the main conclusion of this bibliometric analysis of the core trends. I'm sorry, the core trends on this research. On the research is that new strategy for adaptation in climate transition are needed and are researched. And the new trend is the animal welfare, as expected. the leading research seems to be the animal capital that is related with the cattle and the mitigation greenhouse gases, but especially the nitrous oxide gases. And there is a very limited research regarding the market and the stakeholders. And this is something that is, again, interesting because there is some institutional changes that have to be made and not underlined yet. I think that is all. And I thank you for your time.
Time for questions for Anatoly. Waiting if somebody comes from the chat.
Yeah, so I'll have one. I've seen that you had a very big cluster linked to extensive farming, pasture, grassland. Did you hear me? Okay. Pasture, grassland, biodiversity, everything. And then you had a cluster dedicated for the Holstein, which is completely intensive. Am I right?
Yeah.
So where do you see the publication is going? Which sector is attracting more interest of publications?
Okay. Generally, we must take a look at the red cluster because it has to do with feeding. And this has several parameters. So this is the red in comparison with the blue one. Because it is how to, it has to do with how we deal with the ground. If we use it for food or use it for food just for animals. This is a great field for research. And in my opinion, I was waiting before I conduct the research to find something more recently on about the energetic field, the decarbonization field. But it seems that there is more work to be done there in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anatoly.
Thank you.
Now we have half an hour break of the session, and then afterwards there are more talks about specific installations in farms on renewable energies, on thermal comfort. So please come back in half an hour.